Sir, if you'll step up here next to me, please. If you'll raise your right hand, sir. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Have a seat. If you'll speak up in that small black microphone, that'll help me hear. If you'll tell me both your first name and last name and spell them both.
Ed Gorham, E-D-G-O-R-H-A-M.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, Mr. Whitesell?
Yes. Mr. Gorham, what is your occupation?
I'm a detective with the Murfreesboro City Police Department.
And how long have you been employed with the Murfreesboro Police Department?
Almost 16 years.
And how long have you been a detective?
A little over 6 years.
And were you a detective back on March the 2nd, 2011?
Yes, sir.
And as a result of your duties with the Murfreesboro Police Department, did you have occasion to go to the Raiders Crossing apartments on the evening of March the 2nd?
Yes, sir.
And what were your duties, or what were you assigned to do when you arrived?
When I first arrived, I assisted Officer Henderson. We did a sketch of the apartment and measured the apartment, and then I assisted in looking for evidence.
Okay, sir. And you mentioned that you did a sketch of the apartment and that you measured it. And do you, are you aware of any sketch of the apartment that exists?
Yes, sir.
And is that to scale?
It's close, not to scale, no, sir.
Okay. And you've seen that before?
Yes, sir.
And let me show to you what's been marked as Exhibit Number 6 and ask you to look at that and tell me if you can identify it, please, sir.
Yes, sir. That's a layout of the apartment.
Okay, sir. And do you recall, or do you have the measurements with you that you made that night?
I don't have them with me.
Okay.
There should be a sketch with them on there.
Okay. Now, in addition to the diagram and the sketch and measurements, did you also conduct any further searches?
Yes, sir. I searched outside when we were looking for the knife.
Okay, sir. And in particular, did you search or did you find the knife?
Yes, sir.
And tell us where that was located, please, sir.
We found it in a dumpster to the right of the building.
Okay, let me show to you what's been previously marked here as Exhibit 119, and I'll ask you to look at this, and that is indicated by placard 18. Do you recall those items being in the dumpster?
Yes, sir.
And tell me what those are, please, sir.
Those are 2 kitchen knives.
And did you subsequently, you and other officers, take those into evidence?
Yes, sir.
And then placard number 19, do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, sir. It's part of a Blue Raider windsuit.
Okay, and do you know what this item here is under it?
It's a bra.
And were those items also taken into custody?
Yes, sir.
And then let me show you what's been marked here with placard number 22 and ask you to look at that and tell me if you can identify that, please, sir.
Yes, sir. That's a knife that was wrapped inside of a blanket, inside of a plastic bag.
And does that photograph accurately depict the way that knife and blanket appeared when you located them in the dumpster?
That's after we opened the bag to see what was in it, yes, sir.
Okay, sir. And I want to zoom in here. And I want to call your attention to this particular item. Can you tell me what that is?
That's the blade of the knife.
Okay, sir, and then I'm going to slide this. Can you tell me what this is?
That was the handle of the knife.
Now, did you examine the blade of that knife visually?
Yes, sir.
And did you ever hold it in your hand?
Detective Henderson's the one that picked it up.
Okay, sir. But in looking at it when you were in there, did you observe anything on it that you thought was significant?
It had a red substance that appeared to be blood on it.
Okay, sir. And then let me show you this placard number 23. Do you recognize that?
That's the blanket the knife was wrapped in.
Okay. That, for the record, that's Exhibit 124. Then I'm going to show Exhibit 125 and 126. Do you recognize those items?
It's Tinkerbell that was on the blanket.
All right. Now, Mr. Gorham, let me show you this item and ask you to look at that and tell me if you recognize that.
Yes, sir. That's a sketch of the apartment with the measurements placed into it.
And I'm going to zoom that in a little bit. And if you would, and I know that doesn't show all of them, but let's start there with Miss Stewart's room. Can you tell the jury the width or dimensions of that room?
It was 11 foot by 12 foot.
Okay. And calling your attention to this figure right here, that is 11 feet.
Yes, sir.
And the arrows go to two straight lines at the end, and that indicates the walls.
Yes, sir.
And that would be consistent with the other measurements all the way around the apartment.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, if I could make this the next exhibit.
Sure.
156.
Thank you.
Let me show you this diagram and ask you to look at that and tell me if you can identify that.
That again is the apartment with the furniture put in place.
And, okay, that you answered my question. I was going to ask you, does that show the furniture? Would you make this the next exhibit? Let me show you this diagram, Detective Gorham, and ask you to look at that and tell me if you can identify that.
That again is the apartment, and that has the evidence marked.
All right, and in addition to having the evidence marked, it also shows the various location of the furniture. Is that also correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you put the furniture and the evidence locations in there, would you say that that is accurate to the inch?
It's real close.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. As close as
we can
you
get it.
possibly can get it.
Yes, sir.
That should just be the next exhibit.
Okay, the next numbered exhibit.
158.
Now, Mr. Gorham, calling your attention back to Exhibit 158, the diagram with the furniture and the various locations of certain items. We see beside these, there are numbers. Do you know the significance of those numbers?
Those would be the placard numbers for the
Right.
pictures.
And you see, for instance, 03 duffel bag.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of a duffel bag being located in the breezeway outside of the apartment?
Yes, sir.
And does that accurately depict the location of that in relation to the apartment?
Yes, sir.
And then I believe 04 is labeled as a cell phone. And on what piece of furniture is that cell phone located?
The living room couch.
And do you know who that cell phone belonged to?
Miss Stewart.
And then 05. And tell us what that is, please, sir.
It was a drop of blood on the floor in the hallway.
Court will indulge me a moment. Sure. Let me ask you this. Did you have occasion to go into the apartment?
Yes, sir.
And you had to do that to measure it, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Let me show to you what's been marked previously as Exhibit 88. And do you see placard number 12?
Yes, sir.
And do you know what placard number 12 represents?
The stain of blood on the road.
Okay, sir. And do you see this area around in here?
Yes, sir.
And what does that appear to you to be?
Appears to be some blood spatter.
Okay, sir. And do you see this item right here?
Yes, sir.
And do you know what that is or how it got there?
I believe it's the breather from EMS.
Okay. And then let me show you exhibit number 90. And do you recognize the blood spot again?
Yes, sir.
Then do you see these items right in here, this area?
Yes, sir.
And what does that appear to you to be?
It appears to be stuff left behind by EMS.
Okay, and the red or brownish red, what does that appear to you to be?
I don't know.
Well, didn't you previously identify that as blood in this photograph?
Yes, sir. It's really blurry on this little screen.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Look on the big one, and that may help you.
Yes, sir. It looks like a little piece of blood around, splatter.
Now, I guess what I'm getting at, Mr. Gorham, is there were people in that apartment, in and around that blood, that were down on the floor working on Miss Stewart. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's possible that blood is by people working on her and getting into this blood in the patch. Is that a fair statement?
It could be possible, yes, sir.
And you don't know how the blood in that blood spot, number 5, in the hall, you don't know how that got there.
No, sir.
But based on your diagram and your observation of that, that was the only spot that you found in the hall. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the other, I'm going to move now to this bedroom. Exhibit 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Those are all the locations that you and the other officer measured and mapped. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
That's all the equipment. Oh, yeah. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay.
I take that back.
Sure.
Mr. Gorham, do you know whether there was a search conducted of Shanterrica Madden's bedroom?
Yes, sir.
And were you present when that search was undertaken?
Yes, sir.
And do you know if prior to that, Miss Madden was consulted or talked to by any officers?
Yes, sir.
And were you present for that?
Yes, sir.
And do you know if she executed a consent to search form where she waived her right to require a search warrant?
Yes, sir. Detective Keaton read it to her, and she signed it out of the police car.
Okay, and do you recognize this document right here?
That's a consent to search form.
Okay, and do you see this name,
Yes, sir.
and what is that name?
Shanterrica Madden.
And do you see a signature down here?
Yes, sir.
Now, were you present when she signed it?
I was standing behind Detective Keaton and Detective Henderson.
Okay, and then there is a witness here, and that's one of the detectives.
Yes, sir.
And this particular consent to search, what area does it grant the detectives, or what it says is MPD officers and detectives, what area does it grant permission to search?
Room A of apartment 321,
And do you know who room A belonged to?
Miss Madden.
And how did you have to get into room A to search it?
Patrol had already kicked the door in when they cleared the house.
I'd like to make this the next exhibit, John.
All right.
159, sir.
Thank you.
Those are my questions, John.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Brand?
Yes, sir. Need to retrieve an exhibit. Now, Detective Gorham, you said Miss Madden signed the consent form. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
She cooperated. She didn't give any resistance about signing that. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, you showed several diagrams that were you responsible for getting these diagrams drawn and prepared?
Myself and Detective Henderson did it.
Okay. And there's one of these that has some measurements on it. That's Exhibit 6. No measurements on Exhibit 6, right?
Correct.
There is the Exhibit 156, which has some are those inside wall-to-wall, outside wall-to-wall?
Inside wall to wall.
Inside wall-to-wall, so y'all had a measuring tape there?
Yes, sir.
Is that right? And then General Whitesell asked you, was this to scale, and you said, tell us what you said.
That's as close as I could get it, yes, sir.
Okay. And can I see the measurement of the width of Miss Stewart's bed?
I did not measure the beds. They came, it's a full-size bed. In our computer program, it's just a full-size bed.
Well, I thought you had a measuring tape.
I measured the walls.
Okay, but you had a measuring tape inside the apartment, right?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me the distance from where Miss Stewart, where the majority of blood that they showed you the picture several times a moment ago, to the desk over here with the McDonald's bag? Can you tell me the distance between those two?
Not from that diagram, no, sir.
Well, can you tell me from any diagram?
That should be in our notes.
Okay, so y'all measured the bed and y'all measured the distances?
From the wall out to the evidence, I measured the distance
Okay,
to get a rough. It's within an inch or two, because you got to take the depth of the wall. We'll throw
Okay.
the measurements off a little bit on the computer because it makes a flat wall.
so there are measurements of this area from the foot of the bed to the wall?
I believe I did them, but I'll be honest, I've not looked at this since last March.
Would you agree that would be important information to have?
I usually do that, yes, sir.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you, Detective.
Any other questions, Mr. Walker?
No, Your Honor.
Any questions from our jurors? Not seeing any, thanks, sir. You step down. Please stand.